Hola chicos! Today we're going to be taking a look at stem changing verbs in Spanish. Now, we already know verbs with simple conjugations, with AR, ER, and IR stems. For example, the first column I have here is AR verbs, the second column is ER verbs, and the third column is IR verbs. We can tell the difference between ER and IR verbs in the nosotros and the vosotros forms. They're conjugated slightly differently. Now, when I refer to a stem, I'm referring to the part of the verb that comes before the AR, ER, and IR part. For example, if I take the verb comer, to eat, I'm going to take off the ER, that's the ending, then the stem will be the COM part, com. Now, the verbs we've already looked at, the stems don't change, but we're going to start moving into verbs where the stem does change, and there are a lot of these in Spanish, so it's very important to study and get to know exactly what these verbs are. Now, many times this change occurs due to pronunciation rules or because the verb is close to another word. For example, jugar, to play, is yo juego. It's not yo jugo, because jugo means juice. In your textbook, you'll see, or in some dictionaries, you'll also see jugar, and then perhaps in brackets, ue. When you see that in brackets, it means it does change the stem. Now, the first group of stem changing verbs we're going to look at is e to ie. And one very common verb this occurs in is querer, which is to like or to want. Now, if you're old enough, you may remember the ad campaign for Taco Bell, Yo quiero Taco Bell. Now that's where we see the stem changing verb. Querer is a very common verb in Spanish. So it's not yo quiero, it's yo quiero. Tú quieres, él y usted quiere, ellos quieren, but nosotros queremos, and vosotros queráis. Important to note here that the nosotros and the vosotros forms, the stems do not change. For this reason, they are called, some people call them boot verbs. Now here we have a rather crude drawing of a boot, but you can sort of get the point. So inside the boot we have yo, tú, él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, and ustedes. It's in these forms that the stem does change. It's nosotros and the vosotros forms where the stem does not change. This is very important to remember. Now here we have some common E to IE verbs in Spanish. So we have querer, to like, tener, to have, venir, to come, empezar and comenzar, which both mean to start and to commence, preferir, to prefer, cerrar, to close, perder, to lose, pensar, to think. You may pause the video now. Take a second to practice conjugating these verbs. Okay, so first we have yo quiero, tú tienes, nosotros venimos. Nosotros does not change. Take note here that both tener and venir are exceptions in the yo form. Yo tengo, yo vengo. So it's not yo vino or yo tenno or yo tieno, sorry. They are actually exceptions. Yo tengo, yo vengo. Ellas empiezan. Usted comienza. Ellos prefieren. Vosotros seráis. Vosotros does not change. Tú pierdes. Yo pienso. Other common stem changing verbs are you to ue, such as jugar, which is to play. So it's not yo jugo, because jugo is juice. In this case, jugo de naranja. Instead, it's yo juego. Tú juegas. Ella, él, usted juega. Ellos juegan, but nosotros jugamos. And vosotros jugáis. Here are some common you to ue verbs. Again, you may pause the video, practice conjugating these. Okay, so we have yo vuelvo, I return. Tú almuerzas. I eat lunch. Nosotros dormimos. I sleep. Remember, nosotros does not change. Ellas recuerdan. Recuerda means to remember, not to record. That's a false cognate. Usted juega. Ellos cuentan. Cuentan, contar, means to count. Vosotros podéis. Poder is very common in Spanish. It means to be able to do something. Usually it's followed by an infinitive. Tú muestras. You show. Yo encuentro. I find. Now another common stem changing set of verbs is e to I, such as pedir, which means to ask for, to request. So it's not yo pedo. Pedos are actually something very different. It's what happens after you eat too many beans, for example. Instead, it's yo pido. Tú pides. Él y usted pide. Ellos, ellas, ustedes piden. But nosotros pedimos. So here are some common E to I verbs. You may pause the video. Take a second and practice conjugating these. Okay, so here we have ella sigue. Sigue means to follow. Tú consigues. Conseguir can actually have many different meanings in Spanish. In this case, conseguir may mean to find, as in yo consigo un trabajo. I found a job, or I have found a job. Nosotros pedimos. Ellas dicen. Decir is to say or to speak. Hablar is to talk. There's a subtle but important difference between the two. Usted bendice. Bendecir means to bless. Ellos corrigen. Corrigen. Corregir means to correct. Vosotros servís. Remember, vosotros does not change. So this means to serve. Tú despides. Despedir means to say goodbye. Now, you'll see a few verbs in here, such as conseguir, which have another verb as their root. So obviously, conseguir, the root verb is seguir. So whenever seguir is an exception, conseguir will also be an exception. The same as bendecir. We clearly see decir there as the root, so whenever decir is an exception, bendecir will be as well. The same goes for despedir, whose root verb is pedir. Now, important to remember as well is some of these verbs are irregular in the yo form. So yo digo, like yo tengo, an exception. Also, yo sigo. This also means that all the verbs that have these words as their roots are also exceptions. Yo consigo, yo bendigo. Again, chicos, it's important to remember these are called boot verbs. They change in the yo, tú, él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, and ustedes forms, but not in nosotros or vosotros. This is also covered in Chapter 4 of your textbook. Thanks for watching.